Welcome to Uncloseted Conversations. Even if you stumbled upon this channel by accident, you are welcome here. The stories here are from my heart, from my soul, from my pen to your ears. I hope that you will stay a little longer and open yourself to the magic of storytelling. Here I write fiction, and though not always aligning with reality, it still tugs at heartstrings. Stories are escapes and sometimes a balm to the soul. So, enjoy your time here, and if reality presses down too loud and too hard, come knock at the door, come in, take a seat, grab a coffee, and just exhale. These are veil-bound stories, and the space is free and non-judgmental. Sit back, earphones or pods in, and let's listen to another exquisite romance. Part 1 of El Maestro and the Greek Goddess. When power meets passion, walls fall and empires burn. Two sisters. One a feared warrior queen, the other a world-renowned chef. Power, passion, and desire collide as empires are ruled, hearts are claimed, and love refuses to be tamed. El Maestro, the Greek Goddess, and a bond that will change everything. Chapter 1. Two sisters. Their parents were honest, hard-working people who raised two daughters 5 years apart. Then, one night, they were killed in a local rebellion against the tyrant ruling parts of Puerto Rico. Ariane Santo Navarro was 15. Angelica Narvaez Navarro was 10. From that night onward, Ariane's became more than a sister. She became a shield, a provider, a parent. She fought, sometimes literally, to keep them together, to put food on the table, to make sure Angelica finished school and dreamed without fear. Angelica was told Ariane's joined the military. Or something like it. Angelica never questioned it. She never lacked anything. Ariane's made sure of that. Angelica finished school and went on to study. She had options: medicine, finance, law. On the last day of school, over takeout cartons and shared laughter, they talked it through. "I'm thinking medical," Angelica said. "Or finance." Then, mouthful of noodles, the idea struck. "Chef," she said suddenly. "I think I'd enjoy that." Ariane's laughed, teased her about burning toast, then grew serious. "You can do anything." The very next day, they worked through applications. Angelica went to university. She excelled. Culinary school didn't just suit her, it answered her. What began as talent turned into instinct, then brilliance. Success followed fast. Too fast. Angelica built a life around it. Restaurants. Awards. International recognition. A name whispered with reverence in elite kitchens. Ariane's grew too, just not in a world Angelica knew. Angelica never asked what her sister really did. She only knew Ariane's was gone often. That her job took her away. That silence followed her like a shadow. What Angelica did not know was that her sister was one of the most feared and dangerous figures in Puerto Rico. No one moved without her say-so. Everyone knew the name. El Maestro. Ariane Santos Navarro ruled most of the island from the shadows. If El Maestro backed you, you were untouchable. If she didn't, no one spoke your name again. A week after Angelica received yet another award, she messaged Ariane's. "I met someone." They'd been circling each other for 6 months. She'd finally said yes. An engagement. A celebration. She wanted her sister there. Ariane's promised she would be. Now she stood on a helipad, rotors thundering overhead, looking down at her clothes, dirty, torn, still dusted with debris from hurricane cleanup. "I'll call for a change of clothes," El Maestro, her second-in-command, said. "It's fine," Ariane's replied. "I'll change before dinner. I just want to see Angelica first." An hour later, the helicopter touched down. Her car was waiting. The hotel loomed ahead just as Angelica and her fiancé arrived. Ariane stepped forward and saw Angelica rush back into the car. She slowed, her eyes locking onto the man standing alone in the lobby. And she began to study him. Chapter 2. Mistaken Identity. The man was impeccably dressed. An Armani suit tailored perfectly to his tall frame. A Patek Philippe gleamed on his wrist as he checked it again. Irritable. Impatient. He shifted from foot to foot. Just before Ariane's reached him, another woman approached. Too close. Too familiar. He glanced toward the lobby doors, then pulled the woman into a kiss. Something cold and lethal stirred in Ariane's chest. This was the man her sister was about to marry? The woman hugged him once more and disappeared into the hotel. Ariane's turned slightly, nodding toward her waiting car, a silent command. Then she stepped forward. Hello, I'm... The cleaning staff uses the back entrance, he cut in, sneering. Ariane smirked and took another step closer. Before he could dismiss her again, Angelica's voice rang out. Aria, you came. They embraced. Spencer Gordon watched. Then he pulled Angelica away. Angelica, you can't just go around hugging the cleaning staff. Angelica frowned. Spencer, this is my... She was interrupted. Spencer, darling, there you are. A woman swept in, his mother. Your guests are waiting. Her gaze landed on Ariane's, disgust curling her lips. Oh my. Does this hotel allow the homeless inside now? Angelica tried again. Spencer, this is my sister. Mother, Spencer interjected, take Angelica inside. I need to make a call. That's when Ariane stepped forward and took Angelica's arm. And I need to tell you something. Spencer's mother tried to intervene, but Angelica shook her off. This is my sister. Ariane's. I asked her to be here. The Gordons laughed. How can a renowned chef, his sister chimed in, have a sister who looks like that? Ariane shook her head. Ange. Please. Angelica stepped closer. I don't think this is right for you, Ariane said quietly. Bentley Altman asked about you. Spencer's laughter cracked through the lobby. Chapter 3. Mocking the Sister. Bentley Altman doesn't speak to lowlife, Spencer sneered. You're fucking delusional. Angelica, your sister should be institutionalized. His mother joined in eagerly. You'll be jailed for even saying his name. They laughed together. Ariane's didn't. Another woman joined them, Spencer's sister, and the mocking intensified. Angelica tried to defend her sister, but Ariane's gently stilled her with a hand. I can call him right now, Ange. The lobby doors opened. Guests entered and immediately recognized Angelica. Chef Navarro, it's an honor. Angelica smiled politely. Spencer seized the moment, pulling her closer. You're only here because of Angelica, he spat at Ariane's. Stop name-dropping. She's marrying me. She's taking the Gordon name, our wealth, our connections. Angelica turned fiercely. It's because of my sister that I'm here at all. She sacrificed everything for me. How? Spencer's sister laughed. She doesn't even look clean. Tears welled in Angelica's eyes. Ariane stepped forward and pulled her away. Ange, you don't need these people. Then the lobby doors opened again. 4 men in black suits entered, scanning the room. Their eyes locked onto Ariane's. El Maestro, they whispered. Spencer scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. El Maestro is the most powerful woman in this city. I'd know if she were here. A voice crackled through a watch mic. And then she entered. Chapter 4. Flirtation seemed in order. Zenobia Yana Stavriati. A crimson gown flowed around her like a promise. The slit revealed a sculpted thigh with every step. Heels struck marble in perfect rhythm. Auburn hair tied back messily, as if she'd dressed in a hurry and still conquered the room. The temperature dropped. The lobby went silent. She stopped in front of Ariane's, lifted her hand, brushed her thumb over her own lips. El Maestro, she purred. Must be my lucky day. Spencer tried to speak. Zenobia raised a hand. Silence. What brings you here? She asked. Ariane's arched a brow, nodding toward Angelica. My little sister is supposed to get engaged today. Zenovia's brows rose. Well, this just became interesting. She turned to Angelica. Chef Navarro. I'm honored. Spencer reached for Angelica. Ariane's flinched. Zenobia noticed, of course she did. You don't approve? Zenobia asked lightly. Mrs. Gordon thrust out her hand. We adore your fashion. Ignored. Are you staying long? Zenobia continued, eyes never leaving Ariane's. Dinner at Le Saphir. I've missed the leche asado. Ariane's pulse betrayed her. Her phone buzzed. Are you here yet? Yes. Now. Spencer tried again. I'll arrange the table. Zenobia laughed. Oh, little worm. El Maestro will handle that. Gasps erupted as the doors opened once more. Chapter 5, El Maestro revealed. The lobby doors slid open again. Conversation died mid-syllable. Bentley Altman stepped inside. Cream Versace, tailored within an inch of devotion. A gray waistcoat hugged his frame, the cut precise, disciplined, power without ornament. His black hair was slicked back, immaculate, every detail intentional. He took 3 steps in and stopped. His eyes swept the room once, then locked onto Ariane's. Spencer Gordon surged forward, eager, desperate. Mr. Altman. What an honor, welcome. Bentley didn't even look at him. Bent, Ariane said, her voice calm. Too calm. The sound of it cracked something invisible. Spencer spun. You will not speak to Mr. Altman like that. Bentley shoved him aside as though he weighed nothing and crossed the remaining distance. He stopped a step away from Ariane's and bowed. Deep. Respectful. Final. El Maestro, he said clearly. I am at your service. The silence that followed was violent. It pressed in on every ear, every chest, every heartbeat. If a glass had shattered, no one would have heard it. Mrs. Gordon's mouth fell open. Her daughter's face drained of color, shock freezing her features into something almost comical. Spencer stared, his body refusing to accept what his mind could no longer deny. The name rippled through the room like an aftershock. El Maestro. Ariane's turned slowly toward Angelica. Her sister stood frozen, eyes wide, breath shallow, watching her entire world rearrange itself in real time. Ariane said her name once. Angelica didn't hear it. She said it again, firmer. Angelica Narvaez Navarro. That did it. Angelica moved forward as if pulled by gravity, stopping just in front of her sister. Bent, Ariane said evenly, this is my sister. Angelica Navarro. Bentley straightened immediately, nodding with reverence. Chef Navarro. It's an honor. Then Ariane's turned. And El Maestro fully emerged. Her gaze settled on Spencer Gordon, cold, assessing, merciless. You, she said quietly, and the word alone felt like a verdict. Behind her, guards stepped forward. The woman from earlier was brought into view. The kiss replayed in Spencer's eyes as his face cycled through disbelief, panic, and dread. You humiliated my sister, Ariane's continued, her voice precise and deadly calm. You thought yourself untouchable. She stepped closer. You were wrong. She turned to Angelica and handed her the phone. He's married. His business collapsed 6 months ago. He wanted your name, your reputation, your shield. Angelica stared at the screen. Her breath hitched. Tears spilled, silent and broken. Ariane's wrapped her arms around her, holding her like she had when they were girls, when the world was cruel and she alone stood between Angelica and the fire. Spencer's mother stumbled forward. I didn't know, please. Ariane's lifted her eyes. The woman stopped breathing. Leave, Ariane said. All of you. Now. They fled. As Ariane's turned to walk away with her sister, Zenovia's voice cut through the wreckage. El Maestro. Ariane stopped, but did not turn. Do I get to see you again? Zenovia asked, her tone no longer playful. It carried something else now, intent. Hunger. Respect. Ariane's closed her eyes. Just for a heartbeat. She inhaled. Exhaled. The walls she had built pressed back into place almost. Her jaw tightened. Her shoulders squared. Then, slowly, reluctantly, she nodded. Not a promise. A warning. Zenovia smiled, satisfied. Angelica leaned in, whispering, Aria, you have so much explaining to do. Ariane's opened the car door, her hand steady again. Yes, she said softly. I do. The convoy pulled away, leaving behind a lobby in ruins and the echoes of a truth too large to ignore. Zenovia Yana Stavriati stood alone in the aftermath, eyes burning. Soon, she murmured to the empty space. Very soon, El Maestro. Chapter 6, Sister's Reckoning. The car door closed with a soft, decisive thump, too gentle for what waited inside. The city slid past the tinted windows in streaks of gold and shadow. Sirens wailed somewhere far away, life continuing with its usual audacity, unaware that an entire childhood had just been rewritten in a hotel lobby. Angelica sat rigid beside Ariane's, hands folded in her lap like she was afraid to touch anything. The phone still rested in her palm, screen dark now, but heavy. Too heavy. Bentley's car followed at a respectful distance. The guards were silent. No one spoke. Ariane's loosened her grip on the steering wheel by a fraction. "Okay," Angelica said at last. Her voice didn't shake. That somehow made it worse. "Start talking." Ariane's exhaled slowly through her nose. She kept her eyes on the road. "I didn't lie about everything," she began. "I just edited." Angelica let out a soft, humorless laugh. "You didn't edit, Aria. You wrote a completely different genre." That earned a glance. Brief. Careful. "I joined to protect us," Ariane said. At first. Angelica turned toward her then, really looked at her, at the scars she had never asked about, the stillness that now made terrifying sense. "Protect us from what?" "From the people who killed our parents. From the chaos that followed. From the men who think hunger makes children easy to own." The words settled between them like ash. "I didn't plan to become this," Ariane's continued. "I planned to survive. Then to make sure you could." Angelica swallowed. "All those years you were gone, the missed birthdays, the holidays, the silence." "I was watching," Ariane said quietly. "Always." The car slowed at a red light. Ariane's finally looked at her. "You never lacked because I refused to let the world touch you the way it touched me." Angelica's eyes burned. "You don't get to decide that alone." "I was 15, Ariane snapped, and then caught herself. Her voice softened. "I was terrified." Silence again. Thicker this time. "So," Angelica said, wiping at her eyes, "El Maestro. Warrior Queen. Most of Puerto Rico bows, and I didn't even know the crown existed." Ariane's almost smiled. "Almost. I wanted you to have a life untouched by blood and power," she said. "White tablecloths. Clean kitchens. Creation instead of control." Angelica stared out the window. "And Spencer?" Ariane's joy tightened. "I knew something was off. I should have said something sooner." Angelica shook her head. "No. You said it when it mattered." She turned back. "But don't you ever do that again. Don't decide what I can and can't survive." Ariane's nodded once, this time without hesitation. "I hear you." They drove the rest of the way in silence that wasn't hostile anymore. Just full. Heavy with grief, love, and a truth that could no longer be folded away. As the car pulled into the compound, Angelica spoke again, softer. "I don't hate you." Ariane's chest loosened. "But," Angelica added, "you owe me everything. The whole story." Ariane shut off the engine. "I know," she said. "And I'll tell you." She paused, then added with a faint, tired smirk. "Just, maybe after I shower. And change out of hurricane chic." Angelica huffed, a broken laugh, but real. "Deal." And for the first time that night, the sisters stepped forward together, no secrets between them, only the long road of truth ahead. Chapter 7. The Introduction. The compound gates slid shut behind them, sealing the city out. Angelica stepped out of the car and paused, taking in the scale of the place, the quiet, the control, the way everything seemed to wait for Ariane's. She hadn't said anything yet, but the questions lived in her posture. Bentley was already there. He stood beside his car, jacket removed, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest he didn't need to perform authority, he simply carried it. When he saw Angelica, he straightened immediately, expression shifting into something rare and genuine. Ariane's touched Angelica's arm. "And," she said, voice steady again, grounded. "Once again, this is Bentley Altman." Bentley inclined his head, not a bow, not casual. Something in between. "Respect." "You already know my name," he said. "But not why." Angelica lifted a brow. "You don't usually stalk chefs through hotel lobbies?" Ariane snorted before she could stop herself. Bentley smiled. Only the ones who change the industry. Angelica blinked. Ariani's continued, tone matter-of-fact, like she was listing weather conditions instead of legends. Bentley Altman. Private equity. Hospitality empires. Shipping. Agriculture. He owns more restaurants than most people own shoes. Bentley gave her a look. El Maestro, your acknowledgement, honor me. 10 Michelin stars, Ariani's added. Across 4 continents. 3 of them personally retained after acquisition. Angelica froze. 10. Bentley nodded once. Your food made me jealous. That earned him her full attention. Ariani's watched them, arms crossed, protective instinct humming under her skin. He doesn't collect chefs, Ariani said. He backs them, funds them, then stays out of their kitchens. Bentley met Angelica's gaze. I tasted your leche asado in Barcelona. It stopped a table of 6 powerful men mid-argument. Angelica's lips parted despite herself. You didn't just cook, he continued. You told a story. Every plate felt intentional, heritage without nostalgia, precision without arrogance. She swallowed. Ariani stepped in, softer now. She didn't chase fame, Ariani said. She built spaces. Her first restaurant was 5 tables and a borrowed stove. Angelica smiled faintly, memory flickering. Bentley nodded. And yet every one of your restaurants feels the same. Different menus. Different cities. Same soul. Angelica finally found her voice. I designed them like kitchens I'd want to disappear into, she said. Open. Honest. No pretense. That's why they work, Bentley replied. You respect the craft. You respect people. Ariani's glanced between them. He noticed how you promoted staff, she said. Equity sharing. Training pipelines. No exploitation. Angelica looked at her sister, startled. You've been watching that closely? Ariani's met her gaze. Always. Bentley stepped back slightly, giving space. I asked about you, he said honestly. Because I wanted to know who you were before the awards. Before the name. Angelica exhaled, something loosening in her chest. So, she said carefully, you weren't there to buy me. No, Bentley said without hesitation. I was there to understand you. Ariani's nodded once, approval given, not lightly earned. Angelica glanced at her sister, then back at Bentley. Then, she said, squaring her shoulders, you're welcome to stay for dinner. Bentley smiled, genuinely this time. I'd be honored. From the terrace above, unseen, Zenobia Yana Stavriati watched the lights of the compound glow. 3 forces now shared the same orbit. And the universe, as always, leaned in eager to see what would break first. Chapter 8, Heat, Hands, and Quiet Understanding. The kitchen was alive. Not frantic, intentional. Copper pans caught the light. Herbs lay bruised and fragrant on the counter. Angelica moved through the space barefoot, grounded, hair tied back, knife an extension of her hand. Bentley stood a respectful half-step away, sleeves rolled up further now, hands washed, listening more than speaking. So, he said, watching her work, you always cook when you're thinking. Angelica smiled without looking up. I cook when I need to remember who I am. He nodded, as if that made perfect sense. I liked how you scaled, he continued. Your first restaurant stayed profitable because you refused to expand until your people were ready. I refused to expand until I was ready, she corrected gently. The rest followed. Bentley leaned against the counter. Most chefs chase stars. You chase standards. She finally looked at him then really looked. You noticed that. I noticed structure, he said. You built systems that didn't eat the soul of the kitchen. Angelica plated a tasting spoon and handed it to him. Then tell me, she said, eyes challenging, what you taste. Bentley tasted. Closed his eyes. Discipline, he said slowly. And defiance. She laughed. That's my family in a nutshell. From the doorway, unseen, Ariani's paused. Chapter 9, The Warrior Returns. The storm had been washed from her skin. Ariani's descended the stairs changed, transformed. Black tailored trousers, high-waisted, sharp as intent. A silk blouse the color of deep obsidian, cut clean, flowing where it mattered. A structured jacket draped over her shoulders like a mantle, not worn, claimed. Boots polished. Hair pulled back low and precise. No jewelry. No excess. Power didn't need adornment. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching. Bentley noticed first. He straightened immediately. Angelica felt the shift in the room before she saw her. "Wow," she said softly. "There she is." Ariane stepped into the light, the kitchen seeming to recalibrate around her. "You're bonding," she observed dryly. "Over food," Angelica replied. "As all meaningful things should be." Bentley inclined his head. "Your sister has a way of building empires without losing herself." Ariane studied him, then nodded, approval earned again. "She always has." Angelica plated dinner, simple, elevated, intimate. 3 plates. No ceremony. They sat at the kitchen island. "This," Angelica said, gesturing between Bentley and herself, "this feels easy." Bentley smiled. "Good foundations usually do." Ariane's watched them, something warm and unfamiliar settling in her chest. Relief. Maybe hope. "Just remember," Ariane said lightly, "if you break her heart." Bentley raised a hand. "I value my continued existence." Angelica laughed, rich and unguarded. Outside, the night deepened. Elsewhere, Zenobia felt it. The warrior queen stepping fully back into her skin. And somewhere between simmering sauce and sharpened desire, 2 love stories began to take shape, one forged in warmth, the other destined to burn. Chapter 10, Zenobia, the Waiting Flame. Zenobia Yana Stavriati stood barefoot at the edge of her penthouse. The city of Puerto Rico spread beneath her like a conquered lover. Glass walls. Midnight lights. The ocean breathing far below. She held a crystal tumbler in her hand, untouched. The drink had melted, watered down, forgotten. Her attention was elsewhere. Entirely. El Maestro. The name rolled through her mind like a low drumbeat. Not whispered. Not fantasized. Felt. She had chased queens before, political, financial, cultural. Men and women who thought they ruled. Zenobia dressed them, shaped them, discarded them when boredom arrived. But Ariane Santos Navarro. That was different. Zenobia smiled slowly, predator soft. Dirty clothes. Storm-scarred skin. Eyes that carried violence and restraint in equal measure. A woman who could dismantle a room without raising her voice, and who had hesitated. That nod. That reluctant, restrained nod replayed again and again. Zenobia moved through the penthouse, silk robe trailing behind her, fingers grazing marble, steel, glass. Every surface reflected her, power wrapped in elegance, but tonight, even she felt unsettled. She didn't like waiting. She liked deciding. She stopped at the wall where surveillance screens usually glowed dark. With a flick of her wrist, one lit up feeds from the city she owned in quieter ways. Clubs. Galleries. Hotels. Whispers. El Maestro doesn't linger, she murmured to herself. She moves. And yet she had paused. That was the crack. Zenobia lived for cracks. She sank onto the velvet sofa, one knee drawn up, chin resting lightly against it. Her expression wasn't lust. It was curiosity sharpened into obsession. "You're not afraid of me," she said aloud to the empty room. "You're afraid of what you'd become if you weren't." Her phone lay face down on the table. She hadn't called. She wouldn't chase. Not yet. Zenobia believed in gravity. In inevitability. In 2 forces pulled into the same orbit whether they liked it or not. She rose, crossing to the bedroom where gowns hung like weapons, reds, blacks, silvers. She touched one absently, then withdrew her hand. "Soon," she said again, softer now. Less promise. More truth. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the water. Somewhere across the city, Ariane Santos Navarro stood freshly armored in power clothes, trying very hard not to think about a woman in crimson who had looked at her like a challenge worth breaking rules for. 2 queens. 2 fires. Both waiting. Chapter 11, Permission. Dinner had ended the way good meals always do, slowly, reluctantly, with plates scraped clean and conversation lingering like warmth in the room. Bentley checked his watch, then set it aside again. I should go, he said, standing. Tomorrow starts early. Angelica nodded, though she clearly wasn't ready for the evening to end. Bentley turned not to her, but to Ariane's. The room shifted. Angelica watched, stunned, as a man who owned continents' worth of influence straightened his posture and faced her sister like a soldier before a commander. El Maestro, Bentley said evenly, with your permission. I'd like to get to know your sister. Angelica's mouth fell open. Ariane studied him for a long beat, measured, unblinking. My sister is not a territory, Ariane said. She doesn't require permission. Bentley nodded immediately. I know. This is about respect. Yours. And hers. Angelica looked between them, disbelief flickering across her face. Ariane's exhaled slowly. You may court her, she said at last. But understand this, Angelica chooses freely. If you ever make her feel small, unsafe, or secondary. She didn't finish the sentence. Bentley met her gaze without flinching. Then I deserve what follows. Ariane's inclined her head once. That was it. Bentley turned to Angelica, his tone lighter now. Human. I'll call you soon, he said. If you want me to. Angelica laughed softly, still trying to process the evening. I think I'd like that. He smiled, warm, genuine, and left. The door closed. Silence rushed in. Angelica turned slowly toward her sister. He bowed to you. Ariane's leaned back against the counter. Yes. Bentley Altman, Angelica continued faintly, 10 Michelin stars, global empires, bowed. To you. Yes. Angelica blinked hard. You rule half of Puerto Rico. Roughly. Angelica stared at her like she was seeing a stranger wearing her sister's face. You, she whispered, then louder, you were packing my lunches and arguing with teachers and pretending you were in logistics. Ariane's mouth twitched. Angelica stepped closer, hands on her hips now, chef stance, no escape. No more editing, she said firmly. No half-truths. No silence. You don't get to protect me from this anymore. Ariane's closed her eyes. When she opened them, the warrior queen receded, just enough to reveal the 15-year-old girl who had stood in ashes and decided the world would never take another thing from her family. Okay, she said quietly. She gestured toward the kitchen table. Sit. Angelica obeyed. Ariane's remained standing, as if sitting would make it too real. When our parents died, she began, the men responsible thought they'd erased us. I let them think that for a while. Angelica's breath hitched. I learned who held power, who sold weapons, who starved neighborhoods to make them obedient. I didn't fight them head-on. She met Angelica's eyes. I replaced them. The room felt smaller. I built alliances. I made deals no one else wanted to touch. I punished betrayal. I rewarded loyalty. I became necessary. Angelica swallowed. El Maestro. They named me, Ariane said. I just answered. Angelica sat back, stunned. All those nights you were gone. I was making sure you never had to know this world existed. Angelica stood and wrapped her arms around her sister, holding her tightly. You idiot, she whispered, voice breaking. You didn't have to carry it alone. Ariane's closed her eyes, resting her forehead against Angelica's. I know, she said. But I did. They stayed like that for a long moment, two sisters, finally standing on the same ground. Outside, the night held its breath. Chapter 12, The Weight of the Crown. Angelica didn't let go of her. Not right away. When she finally did, she stepped back, but she didn't sit. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, grounding herself like she did before opening a new restaurant in a hostile city. Arya, she said quietly, people don't whisper a name like that unless it ruins lives. Ariane's nodded once. They don't. Angelica met her gaze. I need to know how far this goes. Because what I saw tonight, fear, reverence, obedience, that isn't symbolic. Ariane's exhaled slowly and turned toward the window, the city glowing beyond the glass. It started small, she said. Protection runs. Information trades. Making sure neighborhoods weren't bled dry by men who profited from chaos. She paused. Then someone broke a deal. Angelica stiffened. I didn't retaliate, Arianes continued. I removed him. Quietly. Efficiently. And I made sure everyone knew why. Angelica swallowed. That's when they started listening. Arianes turned back. Power doesn't come from violence, she said. It comes from predictability. From knowing I don't act out of emotion, but I will act. Angelica closed her eyes briefly. How far? She asked again. Arianes didn't answer immediately. I control ports, she said finally. Shipping routes. Labor unions. Construction contracts. Half the private security firms on the island. Angelica's breath hitched. I influence who gets elected, Arianes added. Not by rigging votes, by deciding which campaigns don't survive. The silence was heavy, absolute. I decide which neighborhoods get rebuilt after storms, she said softly. Which ones get forgotten? Angelica's voice trembled. That's God level. Arianes shook her head. No, gods don't bleed. She stepped closer. I don't traffic children. I don't sell women. I don't destroy communities for profit. And I definitely don't sell or promote drug. That's the line. Angelica searched her face. And the men who do? They don't operate here. Angelica's stomach tightened. That fear you felt tonight, Arianes said, isn't because I'm cruel. It's because I'm consistent. Angelica leaned back, staring at the ceiling. So, when Bentley bowed, he wasn't afraid, Arianes said. He was acknowledging jurisdiction. Angelica laughed weakly. Of course he was. She sobered quickly. And me? Angelica asked. How exposed am I? Arianes' voice softened. You're untouchable. By choice. By reputation. By consequence. And your reputation is entirely your own, no influence from me. Angelica met her eyes. Because you're El Maestro. Yes. And if someone tried? Arianes' gaze darkened, not angry. Final. They'd be gone before you ever knew. Angelica shivered, not from fear, but understanding. She crossed the room and hugged her sister again. I built kitchens, she whispered. You built a world. Arianes rested her chin against Angelica's head. I built it so you wouldn't have to. Angelica pulled back, eyes fierce now. No more secrets, she said. If I'm going to stand in this world, even adjacent to it, I need truth. Arianes nodded. Then you get it, she said. All of it. Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time. Chapter 13, The Invitation. The morning air still smelled faintly of ocean salt and the aftermath of the storm when a black, unmarked courier van glided into the compound. Arianes didn't flinch at the arrival. Packages, shipments, occasional informants, they were all part of her world. But this was different. The driver stepped out, carrying a slender black box, hand-wrapped in white gloves. A small card rested on top. Arianes cut through the wrapping with precision. Inside was a gown. Not just any gown. It shimmered like it had captured the sunset and molten fire in fabric, fluid and sharp all at once. Crimson, with just enough cut to signal danger and elegance at the same time. She lifted it, fingers brushing the silk. The card was embossed with gold letters. El Maestro, wear this when the city's shadows need reminding what power looks like. Dinner awaits. Zenobia Yana Stavriati. Arianes' lips twitched. A challenge. A tease. A summon. Angelica leaned against the doorway, curiosity tempered by awe. That's not subtle, she murmured. Arianes placed the dress carefully on the counter. Subtlety is for children who want to hide. This is an invitation to a storm. Angelica's eyes widened. And she knows exactly what she's doing. Yes, Arianes said, letting a slow exhale escape. Her fingers lingered on the fabric. And she wants me to respond. The warrior queen paused, looking out the window at the city sprawled beneath her. The waves of power and danger rolled in her veins, quickening with anticipation. Zenobia had extended the gauntlet, and Arianes was no stranger to picking up what she threw. She turned to Angelica. Dinner. Tonight. I go on my terms, in my way. But she's not the only one choosing the evening. Angelica studied her sister, sensing both the excitement and the weight of what that gown implied. You're really going to do it? Ariane's smirk was slow, measured, lethal. Yes. And when I do, she'll learn why the city whispers my name like a prayer. The dress hung like a promise in the kitchen. A warning. And the night had yet to begin. Chapter 14. Lucifer, Collision Course. The evening sky had deepened to navy velvet by the time Ariane's arrived at Lucifer. The valet barely dared to breathe as she stepped from the car. She wore the crimson silk gold-trimmed gown Zenobia had sent. Sharp lines, fluid drape. The dress didn't ask for attention, it commanded it. Inside, the restaurant's lighting softened over polished marble, flickering like candlelight caught in crystal. Angelica moved like she owned the kitchen, even though tonight, the audience would be unusual. Bentley, she said, tossing him a towel as she tied her apron. You're cooking tonight. With me. He blinked. We're cooking together? Yes, she said. For them. Her eyes flicked toward the private dining area where Ariane's had already arrived. And yes, you follow my lead, but don't hide behind it. Bentley's jaw tightened with both respect and excitement. Lead, he said. I'll follow. The kitchen filled with the scent of roasting lechon, sizzling garlic, and caramelizing onions. Heat rose, coating their skin, unspoken words simmering between each precise movement. Angelica handed him a knife, fingers brushing his. Bentley caught it, his eyes holding hers for a fraction longer than professional necessity allowed. Focus, Angelica muttered with a teasing smirk, though the tremor in her tone betrayed her. Outside, Ariane's entered the dining room, quiet but all presence. She paused in the doorway, letting the red silk cascade down her frame. Zenobia sat across the table, legs crossed, hands lightly resting on the marble, eyes glinting with anticipation. The air changed from heat to electricity. Angelica plated a tasting portion and passed it to Bentley. This is how you balance the acidity with the sweetness, she said. Now try. Bentley tasted, nodded, adjusted the seasoning. You always measure with intuition first, he said. Then numbers second. Exactly, Angelica replied, smiling. You've got talent, but you need to learn my rhythm. Bentley grinned, caught between admiration and something deeper. Ariane's watched from the side, unreadable, yet every movement of her sister and Bentley seemed amplified under her scrutiny. Zenovia's gaze, meanwhile, flicked from Ariane's to Angelica and back, sharp and calculating. Angelica leaned closer to Bentley, whispering over a tray of roasting herbs. El Maestro knows I invited you. Don't be intimidated. Just follow my lead and don't forget, respect the room. Bentley nodded, understanding. The room or her? She smirked, brushing past him. Both. And tonight, one is more dangerous than the other. Ariane's, in crimson silk, smiled faintly from the doorway. One eyebrow raised, observing the chemistry between Angelica and Bentley, the mutual fire, the mutual respect. This was familiar territory, power paired with precision. But different. Softer. Dangerous in its own way. Zenobia, on the other hand, leaned back in her chair, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She had sent the gauntlet. Now she watched the response, savoring the unfolding choreography of ambition, skill, and desire. Dinner would not just be about food tonight. It would be about testing bonds, measuring strength, and understanding the pulse of three worlds colliding: Ariane's, Angelica, Bentley, and the Greek goddess watching from the other side of the table. Chapter 16. Ariane's and Zenobia. First collision. The city lights spilled across polished marble floors, reflecting like tiny fires. Ariane's moved with that familiar precision, every step measured, every muscle coiled but relaxed. Crimson silk clung to her like a second skin, but the power beneath the fabric was unmistakable. El Maestro had arrived. Zenobia was already there, seated elegantly, the long lines of her gown catching the low light. Auburn hair fell in soft chaos over her shoulders, eyes sharp and assessing. The faintest curve of her lips suggested amusement and challenge. When Ariane's entered, Zenobia leaned back slightly, as if letting gravity pull her into this orbit. The air seemed to condense. Zenobia purred, her voice low and smooth, a cat ready to pounce. El Maestro in person. At last. Ariane's eyes swept the room, finally landing on the Greek goddess. Calm. Controlled. Measured. You sent me a dress, she said simply. No accusation. No gratitude. Just recognition. I did, Zenobia replied, standing with languid elegance. Each movement was deliberate. I thought it might fit the part of someone unforgettable. Ariane's arched an eyebrow. I don't wear dresses to be unforgettable. I wear them because I am. Zenovia's eyes glimmered, a flicker of surprise, or was it admiration, passing through her gaze. Is that so? Ariane stepped closer, slow, a predator's measured approach. I don't need a reminder. Zenovia's lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile. No, she agreed, you don't. But some reminders are deliciously necessary. Ariane stopped a step away, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her, yet distant enough to maintain the unbroken wall of command. I imagine you have intentions, she said. I do, Zenobia admitted softly, taking the first deliberate step toward her. But I also know power when I see it. Ariane's tilted her head slightly, studying the fashion goddess who dared to enter her domain. Power, she murmured, isn't something to admire. It's something to obey or fear. Zenobia leaned in slightly, voice dropping to a growl that made the room feel smaller. Fear isn't my style. I prefer fascination. Respect. A challenge. Ariane's allowed herself a slow, measured exhale. You've sent a dress, summoned me to dinner, and now speak like you own the night. That's ambitious. Zenovia's smile widened just enough to reveal intent. Ambition is the only language I speak. And tonight, I want to speak it with you. Ariane's pulse quickened, though she would never show it. She measured her response like a blade poised to strike. Then speak carefully. I don't suffer fools or women who misjudge me. The faintest hum of electricity seemed to pass between them. Both knew this was more than curiosity. This was a collision of two forces that refused to bow. Zenobia finally extended a hand, slow, deliberate. Then, warrior queen, shall we begin? Ariane's didn't take it immediately. She studied the hand, then the eyes, then the poised confidence of the woman before her. Finally, she gave a hesitant, measured nod, acknowledging not just the challenge, but the danger, the promise, and the intrigue. Yes, she said softly. We shall. The room seemed to inhale. And outside, the city didn't dare interrupt the first sparks of a storm that could consume them both, or lift them higher than either had ever imagined. Chapter 17. The dance begins. Ariane settled at the table, posture impeccable, every line of her body radiating control. She didn't need to speak first. She never did. Zenobia slid into the seat across from her, heels silent on marble, a predatory grace in every movement. Her eyes flicked to the dress, still hanging nearby, a subtle reminder of power, of intent. The first course arrived, a delicate amuse-bouche of compressed mango with a hint of chili, a subtle nod to Angelica's signature flair. Zenobia picked up her fork, deliberately slow. I must confess, she said lightly, I expected the warrior queen to be less charming in person. Ariane's arched a single brow, voice measured. Charm is not a weapon. It's a luxury. One I rarely indulge in when necessary. Zenobia smiled, unruffled. Good. I prefer my opponents not to waste theirs. Ariane's tilted her head, eyes sharp. And you? Do you consider yourself an opponent? Zenobia leaned forward, fingers brushing the edge of her plate, voice dropping into that low, deliberate growl. Not yet. But I hope to be a worthy one. Ariane's allowed herself the faintest exhale, letting a thread of intrigue slip through. Curiosity is dangerous. Danger, Zenobia countered, is attractive. Ariane's lips twitched, not a smile, but acknowledgement. Attraction is irrelevant. Influence matters. Control matters. Obedience matters. Zenobia said softly, but influence is measured not by obedience, but by choice. By desire. By whether one wants to yield. Arianes paused, studying her. The woman before her wasn't flustered. She wasn't afraid. Not even slightly. And that made her interesting. Dangerous. The second course arrived, a perfectly seared scallop with a delicate foam of citrus and saffron. Zenovia's fork hovered, teasing, before she spoke again. "Do you ever tire of being feared?" she asked. Ariane's gaze sharpened. "Fear is earned. It is not optional. And no one else decides how it is wielded." Zenovia leaned back, eyes glinting with quiet fire. "Then I will not fear you. But I will not flinch either. I prefer the thrill of balance, of two forces meeting without collapsing." Ariane's pulse quickened under the silk and the challenge. She could sense the electricity, the game being played, not in swords or bullets, but in words, in presence, in controlled exhalation. "You enjoy tests," she said softly. "I live for them," Zenovia replied. "And you are perhaps the most elegant test I've ever encountered." Arianes allowed herself a slow nod, subtle, hesitant, measured. One that acknowledged not just the challenge, but the stir of something unspoken. Zenovia's eyes softened ever so slightly, a whisper of triumph. The hunt had begun. Chapter 18, Angelica and Bentley. In the kitchen, heat and aroma dominated. Angelica moved like water, Bentley like fire. Together they created something neither could do alone. Plates arrived, sauces whisked, and every movement was conversation. "You've got an instinct for timing," Angelica said, tossing a seared scallop to Bentley. He caught it, eyes holding hers. "I've had good teachers." "You've had one tonight," she whispered, seasoning the phone just right. Bentley leaned closer, voice low, almost a breath. "And what about you? Do you ever get tired of carrying the weight of every expectation?" Angelica smirked. "I'm used to it. But it helps to have someone who doesn't flinch." Across the hall, Arianes and Zenovia played their own game of power, words sharp as knives. In the kitchen, Angelica and Bentley worked in harmony, every motion building trust and rhythm. Two couples. Two worlds. One city. Heat and tension radiating in different forms, one a storm of power, the other a fire of connection. And outside, the night waited, dark and expectant, knowing the two forces would soon collide. The first course was gone, amuse-bouche devoured in silence heavy with anticipation. The second arrived, delicate seared scallops, citrus saffron foam. Angelica and Bentley had orchestrated it with precision, every detail a testament to their chemistry. Arianes lifted her fork slowly, eyes never leaving Zenovia. "Delicate," Zenovia said, her tone low, smooth, as if rolling a rare wine across her tongue. "But with edge." Arianes raised a brow. Edge is often underestimated. People fear it until it cuts them cleanly. Zenovia leaned forward slightly, letting the curve of her body brush into the space between them, a subtle but undeniable claim of territory. "I like knives," she murmured. "But I prefer those that are wielded with intent. Precision." Arianes let her eyes trace the line of Zenovia's jaw, the confidence in her posture. Intent is often more frightening than the blade itself. Zenovia's smile was slow, deliberate, teasing. "And yet, some blades fascinate. They call to you." Arianes picked at the scallop with care, voice steady, measured. "Fascination is dangerous. Desire is volatile. But you," her eyes flicked to Zenovia, unwavering, "you seem unafraid of both." "Unafraid," Zenovia echoed, voice dropping an octave, "because I've learned which storms are worth walking into." She paused, letting the words hang like smoke. "And which ones to set in motion." Arianes allowed a subtle exhale, the faintest tremor of interest slipping through her control. "You understand danger," she said softly. "Few do. Most either underestimate it or run from it." "I've never run," Zenovia replied, leaning back just enough to let her gaze travel from Ariane's eyes to her lips and back again, slow, deliberate. "And I don't intend to start tonight." Ariane's fingers tapped lightly on the table, a rhythm almost imperceptible, a warning and an invitation all at once. "Control is a language few speak fluently," she said. I hope you are prepared to converse. Zenovia's laugh was soft, musical, teasing yet threaded with steel. I don't just converse, she said. I challenge. I test. And sometimes, I win. Arianes leaned back slightly, the first subtle hint of a smile tugging at her lips. Bold, she murmured. I like that. But do not mistake boldness for strength. They are often confused. Zenovia's gaze softened, just a fraction, letting a flicker of admiration slip through. Then consider this a beginning, she said. A test of strength. And perhaps of more. The third course arrived, lobster tail, seared to perfection, a drizzle of lemongrass-infused butter. Arianes barely touched hers, eyes fixed on Zenobia, every gesture deliberate. Zenobia, in turn, watched Arianes like a predator savoring the hunt. She reached for her glass of wine, swirling it slowly. You're fascinating, El Maestro, she said, letting the words land with weight. I've never met anyone like you. And you are relentless, Arianes countered. I've never met anyone who enters a room and rewrites the rules before a word is spoken. Zenobia tilted her head, letting a soft smile play across her lips. Perhaps rules are meant to be rewritten. Arianes' pulse quickened, not visibly, but enough that the slightest tremor in her fingers betrayed it. Perhaps, she said softly, but only by those who understand the consequences. A delicious silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken challenge, unspoken desire. The air seemed to hum, the city outside holding its breath as two forces tested the gravity of each other. Even the faint clink of cutlery, the soft rustle of napkins, became part of the rhythm, an undercurrent to the war of magnetism and wit that neither wanted to concede. And somewhere, in that measured, perfect storm of glances and words, the first spark caught, silent, electric, inevitable. Chapter 19, Lucifer, the presentation. Angelica and Bentley moved like a single entity in the kitchen, every gesture precise, every glance communicating volumes. The heat of the ovens, the hiss of sautéed seafood, the scent of fresh herbs, it all became part of their rhythm. Last plate, Angelica whispered, placing a perfectly seared fillet of lechon as the centerpiece, garnishing with microgreens and a delicate drizzle of tamarind glaze. Bentley stepped closer, adjusting a smear of sauce with the tip of his finger. Perfection, he murmured. The balance of acidity and richness, it's flawless. Angelica smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. We'll see what the critics say, she teased, though her eyes softened. Come on. Let's serve it before it cools. They carried the dishes into the dining room, the aroma announcing them even before they reached the table. The first course had already set the stage. Now the main arrived. Lobster tail, seared scallops, tender lechon, all paired with Angelica's signature side sauces. Arianes watched from across the table, observing her sister's movement, commanding the space with warmth instead of fear. Zenovia's eyes followed as well, noting every flick of Angelica's wrist, every word Bentley whispered as he placed a plate. Angelica approached the table, bowing slightly, a mix of humility and pride. Dinner, she announced softly, prepared with my partner Bentley, for two remarkable women. Bentley inclined his head in acknowledgement, eyes bright, confident, yet deferential in this moment of artistry. Zenobia leaned forward, a small, approving smile tugging at her lips. Impressive, she said, voice low, teasing. The artistry and the teamwork. I can see why the city talks about you. Arianes nodded slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of her sister's mastery. I did not doubt it, she said. Her tone carried weight, the same calm command that bent the city to her will, but her gaze lingered on Bentley and Angelica, appreciating the effortless bond they shared. Angelica placed the final dish on the table between the two women, hands trembling slightly with excitement. Please enjoy. Every bite is a part of me. Bentley's voice was soft, just loud enough for the table to hear. And a part of both of us. Zenovia's gaze softened at the declaration, appreciating the connection, even as her eyes flicked toward Arianes, measuring, calculating. The contrast was electric, One couple ruled with power and danger, the other with intimacy and shared fire. Arianes raised her fork deliberately, slicing into the tender lechin, tasting the balance Angelica had perfected over years of dedication. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. Zenobia noticed, and she liked it. For a moment, the room held a quiet harmony, the warmth of creation and the thrill of power colliding in a single space under the city lights. Every glance, every bite, every soft murmur became part of the unspoken dialogue of attraction, of respect, of challenges yet to be met. And outside the polished walls of Lucifer, the city itself seemed to pulse, as if knowing that tonight, two storms had met and two fires had been lit. Chapter 20. Sparks between Arianes and Zenobia. The main course was cleared, the delicate clink of plates replaced by the soft hum of anticipation. Arianes rested her hands lightly on the table, posture controlled, yet there was a subtle shift in her chest, a rhythm quickened by the presence of the woman across from her. Zenobia's eyes lingered, unapologetic, daring, like flames testing the metal of her resolve. She leaned forward, elbows lightly on the table, fingers interlaced. "I've waited," she murmured, voice soft but deliberate, "to see the woman who commands a city like a queen." Ariane's gaze didn't waver. "And yet," she said, measured, "you come here as if you can match her." "I don't just come," Zenobia replied, letting her hand brush the edge of the table, dangerously close to Ariane's. "I enter." Ariane's pulse flickered, just enough to betray her control. She leaned slightly, just a fraction, narrowing the distance between them. "Do you understand what that means?" "I understand," Zenobia said, voice dropping an octave, sultry, deliberate. "It means challenge, intrigue, desire. Perhaps all three. I'm prepared." Ariane's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Prepared," she echoed. "Do you know what happens when someone underestimates me?" Zenobia's hand moved lightly, brushing the back of Ariane's hand, a touch soft, deliberate, electric. "I've never been good at underestimating anything." The faintest tremor ran through Ariane's fingers, subtle, measured, but enough for Zenobia to notice. Her eyes glimmered with amusement and hunger. "Good," she whispered, leaning forward. "Because I don't just play at this, warrior queen. I play to win." Arianes tilted her head, considering the goddess before her. "I don't play," she said, voice low, every syllable deliberate. "I conquer. And I do not surrender easily." Zenobia's smile was a slow burn, a promise and a challenge wrapped together. "Nor do I," she murmured. "But perhaps surrender can be negotiated." Arianes allowed herself a subtle exhale, her eyes flicking to Zenobia's lips for just a fraction of a second, enough to make the moment linger. "Negotiation," she said, voice controlled but low, "is only effective when both parties understand the stakes." "The stakes," Zenobia whispered, leaning closer, so close that the heat between them was almost tangible, "are precisely why I've come." Ariane's heart skipped a beat, but her composure remained absolute. She allowed herself a hesitant, deliberate nod, a silent acknowledgement that this was no ordinary encounter, that this woman, this goddess, was a storm unlike any she had faced. Zenobia's eyes flickered with triumph, but also curiosity. Then she said, her voice a sultry drawl, "Let's see how far this storm can go." For a heartbeat, the restaurant seemed to vanish, leaving only two forces circling each other in quiet, measured anticipation. Sparks flickered in every glance, every word, every breath. The night had begun. And it was far from over. Chapter 21. The Tease. Zenobia's eyes lingered, dark and knowing, as she traced the lines of Ariane's face with her gaze. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture a subtle claim. "You know," she murmured, voice low, almost a purr, "I've never met anyone who wears their power like armor, and it's intoxicating." Ariane's lips twitched a small, almost imperceptible curve, but she said nothing. She kept her hands lightly folded on the table, posture perfect, mask flawless. "Armor is necessary," She replied evenly, "When the world underestimates you." Zenobia leaned slightly closer, just enough for the faintest brush of her fingers to threaten the space between them. But some armor," she whispered, "is meant to be tested." Ariane's eyes flickered ever so subtly, just enough to betray interest, but she did not yield. "I do not give access to anyone lightly," she said, voice soft but sharp, every word a controlled strike. Zenobia tilted her head, amusement dancing in her eyes. "No, I've noticed," she said softly. "You're selective, cautious, ruthless when necessary." She let her gaze linger, teasing, challenging. "I wonder, who even deserves a glimpse behind that armor?" Ariane's leaned back slightly, the faintest tightening of her jaw betraying her internal resistance. "Few do," she said, measured, voice firm. "And I have yet to determine if you are one of them." Zenovia's smile curved slowly, deliberately. "I'll accept that as a challenge," she murmured. "Because I'm patient and persistent. And I like a fight I can't predict." Ariane's fingers tapped lightly on the table, a rhythm subtle but deliberate, her way of maintaining control, keeping the distance that still defined her. "Persistence is only admirable," she said softly, "when it respects the boundaries of power." Zenobia leaned back, a flicker of admiration in her gaze. "Boundaries," she said, voice low and teasing, "are invitations, if you know how to read them." Ariane's pulse quickened slightly, but her posture remained a fortress. "Then," she said softly, voice calm yet edged with steel, "you have yet to learn the language of this fortress." Zenovia's lips curved, teasing and dangerous. "I'll enjoy learning," she said, the words a whispered promise that promised friction, challenge, and maybe more. The room seemed to hum around them, charged, heavy with anticipation. Every glance, every pause, every measured word was a spark waiting to ignite, but Ariane's walls remained, just high enough to make the storm even more thrilling. And somewhere, beneath the control and the calm, Zenobia knew, breaking through wouldn't be easy. But the game, the tease, was far too delicious to resist. Chapter 22: Angelica and Bentley in the kitchen. The main courses had been served and cleared, and now the kitchen hummed with a softer, more intimate energy. Bentley moved with quiet authority, orchestrating the mise en place for dessert, while Angelica followed his lead, her hands deft but curious, eager to learn. "Today," Bentley began, voice low and steady, "you're going to master my signature, the molten caramel chocolate sphere. Timing is everything. Precision. And just a touch of daring." Angelica arched a brow, smirking. "Sounds dangerously decadent." Bentley chuckled, leaning closer to demonstrate. "It's an art. You can't rush it. You have to feel it, anticipate it. Like a dance." Angelica watched him intently, absorbing every motion as he tempered chocolate with skillful hands, formed the delicate spheres, and brushed them with a whisper of edible gold dust. "Here," he said, guiding her fingers, "when you fold the caramel, it's not just technique. You want it to sing, to surprise. Like the perfect bite of a story." Angelica followed his hands, her pulse quickening as theirs brushed. "I think I understand," she murmured, voice soft, eyes locked on his. "It's about balance. Between heat, sweetness, and tension." Bentley's smile deepened. "Exactly. You're reading it, intuitively. That's why this will work." She took the sphere he'd formed and gently set it on a plate, trying to mimic his expert touch. He leaned over her shoulder, voice almost a whisper. "Slowly, gently, yes. Perfect. You have the instincts." Angelica laughed, a soft, warm sound that filled the kitchen. "You make it sound so easy." "Easy," he said, leaning just a fraction closer, "is not the word. But beautiful, effortless, that's you." Her cheeks warmed, but she kept working, placing the caramel sphere atop a delicate nest of spun sugar, while Bentley drizzled a whisper of chocolate ganache around it, their movements in quiet harmony. When the final touch was added, they stepped back together, gazing at the dessert like co-conspirators who'd just created a masterpiece. Bentley extended a hand, soft but commanding. Ready to present? Angelica took it, her fingers brushing his just enough to send a thrill up her arm. Ready, she said, voice steady, though her pulse betrayed her excitement. Carrying the plate to the table, they presented it to Arianes and Zenobia with a flourish. Dessert, Angelica said, bowing slightly from the two of us for two remarkable women. Bentley's voice followed hers, low and confident, with just a hint of surprise. Arianes raised an eyebrow, intrigued, while Zenovia's eyes gleamed with interest, both women aware that the chemistry in the kitchen mirrored the tension across the table in a way that was entirely different, yet equally electric. And as Angelica and Bentley returned to the kitchen to savor their shared creation, the room held a rare, fleeting moment of warmth, a bridge between passion, mastery, and connection that no power, no storm, could disrupt. Chapter 23: The Warrior Queen and the Greek Goddess. The final course had been served, but Arianes barely glanced at it. Her gaze was locked on Zenobia, the subtle sway of her posture, the way her auburn hair caught the low light. Every movement was deliberate, a challenge and a promise all at once. Zenobia leaned slightly forward, resting her chin on the back of her hand, eyes never leaving Arianes. "You've kept your distance," she murmured, voice a soft growl, "but I can feel the pulse behind the armor. Strong, sharp, dangerous." Ariane's fingers traced the rim of her wine glass lightly, a measured rhythm that betrayed nothing yet carried everything. "Danger is only threatening to those who underestimate it," she replied evenly. "And few do. Fewer still survive it unscathed." Zenovia's lips curved in a slow, teasing smile. "I don't intend to survive," she whispered, leaning just enough to let her shoulder brush Ariane's, a deliberate spark, invisible to anyone else. "I intend to see how high it can climb, and how hard it hits." Ariane's chest tightened imperceptibly, but her composure remained. "Most storms leave only ruin," she said softly. "Are you prepared for that?" Zenovia's eyes glimmered with amusement and hunger. "I've always been drawn to storms," she murmured. "Especially ones that challenge the calm. Ones that demand reckoning." Ariane's hand hovered for a moment over the table, almost brushing Zenovia's, but she held herself back, the faintest flicker of hesitation betraying the control she never showed. "You test boundaries," she said, voice low, measured. "Few survive the pull of this game." Zenobia tilted her head, eyes dark and predatory. "I'm not here to survive," she said, voice soft yet edged with promise. "I'm here to see what you allow me to discover." Arianes exhaled subtly, a hesitant nod just enough to acknowledge the spark between them. It was tentative, fragile, yet charged with promise. Then she said quietly, "Be careful. I do not yield easily, to anyone." Zenovia's smile widened, slow, deliberate, and full of intrigue. "Good," she whispered, letting the words linger in the space between them. "Because I have no intention of asking." And in that silence, the room seemed to shrink. Every heartbeat, every glance, every breath drawn between them became a battlefield of magnetism. Two forces, titanic, circling each other, aware of the danger, thrilled by it, and utterly unwilling to back down. Chapter 24: A Subtle Spark. The conversation had slowed, a lull in the teasing, leaving only the low hum of the restaurant and the soft clatter of cutlery from nearby tables. Ariane sat upright, commanding, poised, yet there was a tension in the slight flex of her fingers on the table, the almost imperceptible shift of her shoulders toward Zenobia. Zenobia leaned forward, eyes dark, searching, a slow smile tugging at her lips. She reached for her glass of water, fingers brushing ever so lightly along the side of Ariane's hand as she passed it. It was a whisper of contact, a ghost of touch, but the spark it ignited raced up Ariane's arm, a shiver that she did not allow to show. Her eyes flicked to Zenovia's, and in that instant, the air between them seemed to pulse. "Careful," Ariane said softly, voice steady, controlled, yet threaded with a hidden awareness. "I do not yield easily." Zenovia's smile widened, slow, deliberate. I wouldn't expect you to, she murmured, letting her fingers linger an inch too close for anyone else to notice. I like a challenge. Ariane's lips twitched, barely perceptible, as if acknowledging the danger in that tiny spark. She shifted slightly in her chair, the faintest movement bringing her hand almost brushing Zenovia's again, but she pulled back, an unspoken game of push and restraint. Zenovia's gaze held hers, dark, sultry, predatory. You feel that, she whispered, just low enough for Ariane's alone. That pull? That's just the beginning. Ariane's chest rose slightly with a controlled inhale, pulse quickening, but her face remained impassive, mask-flawless. Yet her hand twitched subtly, betraying the storm beneath the surface. And I always finish what I start, Zenovia said softly, her voice a velvety drawl that wrapped around the space between them, teasing, promising, daring. Ariane's allowed a hesitant, almost imperceptible nod, her eyes locking with Zenovia's. A signal. Not surrender, but acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that this woman, this Greek goddess, had breached the outer walls, if only just enough to ignite the fire. The faintest brush of fingers. A shiver. And the game had begun. Chapter 25, Escalation. Ariane's rested her hand lightly on the table, yet the weight of her gaze pinned Zenovia in place. The faintest brush of their elbows, accidental or perhaps deliberate, sent a ripple up her spine she refused to acknowledge. Zenovia's eyes sparkled, dark and calculating. You wear control like a weapon, she murmured, leaning slightly closer, enough for Ariane's to catch the warmth radiating from her body. But even the strongest steel bends under fire. Ariane's jaw flexed subtly, voice low, edged with steel. Not easily. And never fully. Her fingers brushed hers ever so slightly as she adjusted her glass, a deliberate, teasing flick that sent a thrill through Zenovia. Zenovia smiled, slow, predatorily. So the fire is contained. I like that, for now. She leaned in, lowering her voice, letting the words drift over Ariane's ear just enough to ignite the tension. But all fires crave oxygen, don't they? Ariane's pulse quickened. She tilted her head slightly, a subtle defiance in her gaze. Not all flames are meant to burn uncontrolled, she said, letting her words tease challenge. Some are meant to test. Zenovia's hand brushed the back of Ariane's wrist, not enough to be noticed by anyone else, but enough to send a shiver of electricity up her arm. Her lips curved, voice soft, seductive. I love a test. The harder it is, the sweeter the victory. Ariane's breath hitched slightly, controlled, imperceptible, but the storm behind her eyes was unmistakable. She shifted just a fraction, closing the distance by a fraction of an inch, letting the air between them grow impossibly dense. Victory, she murmured, has its price. Zenovia leaned forward, daring, unflinching, letting her hair brush Ariane's shoulder. I am not afraid of the cost, she whispered, the words dripping with promise and challenge. Ariane's eyes narrowed, a subtle smirk teasing the edge of her lips. I do not give lightly. And I do not beg, Zenovia countered, letting her hand hover over Ariane's for the barest second longer, a brush of intent that lingered like a spark threatening to ignite. The table, the restaurant, the entire room seemed to contract around them, a private orbit of heat and danger. Every glance, every shift, every near touch pulled tighter. Neither yielded, yet both were drawn into the orbit of the other, a storm coiling, waiting, inevitable. The wine glasses trembled with tension. Every breath between them was a negotiation, every flicker of a smile a promise, every inch of space a battlefield. And in that charged silence, Zenovia's voice drifted softly, a slow, deliberate taunt. Tell me, warrior queen, how long can you resist what wants you as much as I want you? Ariane's lips parted slightly. Her hand twitched a breath away from crossing the line, a tentative acknowledgement that this storm was far from over. Her reply was measured, yet the undertone betrayed everything. I resist, as long as I must. But the fire is yours to fan. Zenovia's smile deepened, victorious, dangerous. The hunt had begun in earnest. Chapter 26. The First Unmistakable Touch. Zenovia's gaze lingered on Ariane's with a predatory intensity, like a sculptor studying a masterpiece. She let her hand drift, slowly, deliberately, until her fingers lightly rested atop Ariane's hand on the table. The touch was soft, yet intentional, enough to make the pulse in Ariane's wrist spike. Her breath hitched ever so slightly. She didn't pull away. Not immediately. Zenovia leaned in just a fraction, eyes dark, a slow smirk tugging at her lips. "I've tested your armor," she whispered, voice low, intimate, like it belonged only to Ariane's, "and I think I've found the seam." Ariane's chest rose subtly, her jaw flexing as she maintained the warrior's mask, though a tremor of awareness ran through her. "You tread dangerous ground," she said evenly, voice controlled, "but I will not." Zenovia's thumb brushed the back of her hand in a slow, deliberate stroke, cutting her off without words. The simple contact carried the weight of intent, teasing, promise, and challenge all at once. Ariane's lips parted slightly, and for the first time, she allowed a subtle shiver to show, not in body, but in the faint pull of tension along her arm. Her fingers twitched against Zenovia's hand, drawn, resisting and acknowledging simultaneously. "I do not yield," Ariane's murmured, each word deliberate, even as her gaze softened, darkened, and flickered with something she had never shown anyone. "Not easily." Zenovia's smile widened, slow, victorious, and entirely unrepentant. "Good," she whispered, leaning closer so their shoulders brushed lightly. "Because I enjoy the challenge and the chase." The air between them seemed to shimmer, thick with heat and unspoken promises. No one else in the restaurant would have noticed the brush of hands, the subtle lean, the magnetic draw, but for them, it was a collision. Ariane's eyes flickered down to their hands, then back to Zenovia, a hesitant but deliberate acknowledgement. She hadn't surrendered, but she had acknowledged the fire. Zenovia's thumb traced a slow, teasing circle along the back of her hand, and the warrior queen exhaled softly, imperceptibly, letting just the tiniest fraction of her walls lower. The game had moved from verbal sparring to tactile tension. The storm had truly begun. Chapter 27. The flirtation escalates. The brush of fingers had broken something subtle, but undeniable. Ariane's hand remained under Zenovia's, and neither withdrew. Instead, the pause stretched, heavy, charged. Zenovia's lips curved into a slow, sultry smile. "You wear that armor so well." "I wonder," she murmured, voice low, deliberate, "what it hides." Ariane's gaze sharpened, eyes flicking to hers, controlled but dark with curiosity. "What it hides is not easily found," she said evenly, yet there was a twitch at the corner of her mouth, a spark she didn't fully suppress. Zenovia leaned slightly closer so their knees brushed beneath the table, a deliberate, almost teasing contact. But I do like uncovering mysteries," she whispered, letting her fingers shift just enough to gently entwine with Ariane's. Ariane's pulse jumped, subtle but insistent. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her thumb brush lightly against Zenovia's knuckles, testing the reaction, matching the tease. "You are persistent," she said softly, controlled, but the faint catch in her breath betrayed her. Zenovia's smile deepened, a slow, dangerous curve. "I've always liked a challenge," she murmured, leaning in, just enough that their shoulders pressed together. The scent of her perfume, saffron, amber, a hint of fire, washed over Ariane's, sharp and intoxicating. Ariane's eyes flicked down at their hands, the subtle intertwine of fingers, then back to Zenovia's face. Her voice was steady, calm, but the tension underneath was palpable. "Challenges can be costly." "I'm willing to pay," Zenovia whispered, letting her lips curve near Ariane's ear, almost brushing her earlobe in a teasing ghost of contact. "If the reward is worth it." Ariane's breath hitched just slightly, controlled, subtle, but undeniable. She shifted closer, their thighs brushing now, almost deliberate. The air between them shimmered with heat, a storm waiting to break. Zenovia's eyes sparkled with dark delight. You're fighting. I like that, she murmured, her hand tightening just slightly over Ariane's. It makes it more exciting. Ariane's lips twitched in a near smile, the tiniest flicker of surrender, her gaze locking with Zenovia's. Excitement is dangerous, she murmured, voice low, soft, sharp. And I never lose control. Zenovia's laugh was soft, almost a growl, rich with promise. We'll see about that, warrior queen, she whispered, leaning in so their foreheads were nearly touching. We'll see. The moment hung electric, suspended, a storm coiled tight, ready to erupt. Their flirtation had escalated beyond words, beyond glances, into a dance of touch, proximity, and unspoken desire. Ariane's heart beat faster, though her face remained a mask of calm authority. Zenovia's thumb traced a slow, teasing circle on the back of her hand, and the warrior queen's walls, though still high, trembled, just enough to make the storm irresistible. Chapter 28. The Brink Before Departure. Ariane sat back slowly, her hand still entwined with Zenovia's, their fingers lingering, trembling with unspoken promise. The low hum of the restaurant faded into background noise, as if the world itself had narrowed to the space between them. Zenovia's gaze held hers, dark, smoldering, and utterly fearless. You could stay, she murmured, her thumb tracing that slow, teasing circle again. I wouldn't complain. Ariane's chest rose in a controlled inhale. She met that gaze fully, unflinching, yet her pulse betrayed her. I cannot, she said softly, her lips barely parting. Duty calls. Always. Zenovia's hand tightened just slightly over hers, a silent plea masked in confidence. And yet, she whispered, leaning closer, just the faintest fraction, you don't want to leave. Ariane's eyes fluttered, the mask of control wavering for the first time. She leaned in, close enough that their lips were a breath apart, the air between them trembling electric. The scent of Zenovia, spicy, sultry, dangerous, hit her full force. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Everything else fell away, the lights, the dishes, the people. Only them. Zenovia's voice was barely audible, a soft growl that lingered against her ear. One kiss, just one, warrior queen. Ariane's hand twitched in response, drawn, conflicted. Her eyes searched Zenovia's, seeking, testing, resisting, wanting. Then, a subtle but deliberate shake of her head, almost imperceptible, a hesitance that carried both steel and longing. Not yet, she murmured, voice low, strained with restraint. But soon. Zenovia's smirk widened, victorious yet patient. I'll hold you to that, she whispered, letting her fingers linger an extra second before slowly pulling back. Ariane's rose gracefully, the warrior queen restored, her composure flawless, but the spark between them, smoldering, uncontainable, lingered in the space they'd shared. She left the table, each step measured, controlled, leaving Zenovia watching, craving, and smiling with the certainty that the game had only just begun. Chapter 29. Angelica and Bentley in the kitchen. The kitchen was quiet except for the gentle hum of the ovens and the soft clink of utensils. Plates were lined up, desserts waiting to be perfected, and the rich scent of chocolate and caramel filled the air. Angelica worked beside Bentley, watching him move with the fluid confidence of someone who had mastered not just technique, but artistry. Okay, watch closely, Bentley said, holding a piping bag with ease. The key is pressure and rhythm, too much, and the dessert collapses. Too little, and it lacks elegance. Balance is everything. Angelica leaned in, her fingers lightly brushing his as she reached for a whisk. The spark was subtle at first, a shiver of warmth at the contact, but it grew as she noticed the careful, patient way he guided her hand. Like this, she asked, letting him adjust her grip. Bentley's lips curved in a small, private smile. Exactly. See? You're a natural. You have intuition, Angelica. That's rare. Angelica's cheeks warmed, though her smile was playful. Intuition, huh? Guess I learned from the best, or at least someone who knows how to survive pressure. Bentley's eyes flicked up, locking with hers. Survive pressure and thrive under it. That's the difference. His fingers lingered on hers just a fraction too long, deliberate, teasing, a silent invitation. Angelica felt the warmth pool in her chest, a thrill she hadn't expected. You make it sound easy. It's not, he murmured, leaning slightly closer so she could hear his breath over the hum of the kitchen. But with the right partner, it almost is. Her hand brushed his again as she studied a delicate chocolate drizzle. Right partner, huh? She teased lightly, eyes glinting. So, what makes me the right partner? Bentley's gaze softened, attentive and steady. You're focused. Creative. You listen, and you challenge me in the best way. He dipped a finger into the chocolate, letting it trace a line along the edge of her plate, almost brushing her skin. You have fire. And fire deserves respect. Angelica laughed softly, the sound warm and genuine. And here I thought we were just making dessert. He tilted his head, playful yet sincere. Dessert is only the beginning. The process, the connection we find while creating something together, that's the real magic. Angelica felt it then, the rhythm of them, hands moving in tandem, laughing softly, teasing, correcting each other with subtle touches, shared glances. Every gesture carried a pulse, a beat, a conversation that words couldn't capture. By the time the final chocolate sculpture was placed, perfectly balanced, the air between them hummed with possibility. They stepped back, surveying their work, and simultaneously felt it, the unspoken connection, the quiet thrill of something powerful beginning. Bentley's hand hovered near hers as he passed a small tasting spoon. Try this, he said softly, voice low, inviting. Angelica took it, their fingers brushing once more. The taste was exquisite, but the warmth of his hand lingered longer than the chocolate. A spark passed between them, deliberate, electric, undeniable. Perfect, she murmured, eyes meeting his. He smiled, soft, unguarded. Not just the dessert, he said, letting the words hang in the air, heavy with promise. Angelica's lips curved, a hint of laughter and surprise. You're dangerously charming, Mr. Altman. And you're dangerously captivating, Chef Navarro, he replied, letting the brush of their hands linger just a heartbeat longer before releasing it. In the quiet hum of the kitchen, amid the scent of sugar and chocolate, the chemistry between them was undeniable, warm, electric, and real. A partnership forged not just in flavor, but in the shared pulse of connection. Chapter 30. Ariane's, alone in her apartment. The shower had washed away the grime of the day, the sweat of work, but not the pulse of desire that lingered. Ariane's wrapped herself in a dark, tailored robe, its sharp lines echoing the control she wore like armor. Yet in the silence of her compound, her walls trembled, if only slightly. Zenovia's gaze, her voice, the brush of her hand, it replayed over and over, each moment electric, teasing, insistent. The warrior queen, untouchable, feared by many, felt a spark she could neither command nor fully resist. Ariane's closed her eyes, letting her fingers trace the edge of her robe, thinking of the almost touch, the lips so close, the warmth of her shoulder against Zenovia's. She allowed herself one small, private shiver, one acknowledgement that she wanted more, though she would never admit it aloud. Not yet, she whispered to herself. Not until I am ready. But the fire is there. The city stretched below her, lights flickering like distant stars, yet all she could see was the pull of the Greek goddess, the challenge, the tease. El Maestro, in control of all, suddenly felt the thrill of uncertainty, and she hated how much she liked it. Chapter 31. Angelica, alone in her apartment. The smell of chocolate and caramel lingered in her hair as she leaned against the counter, tasting the memory of Bentley's touch, his hands guiding hers, the rhythm they'd found together. Her fingers flexed unconsciously, remembering the slight warmth of his hand brushing hers over the chocolate drizzle. Angelica laughed softly, shaking her head. I can't believe I'm thinking about him this much, she murmured, eyes closing as she replayed the laughter, the teasing, the the soft vulnerability hidden beneath his polished, powerful exterior. She remembered the way he had praised her intuition, the patience he had shown, the unspoken conversation of gestures and glances. It was more than cooking, it was connection, understanding, and something that stirred her heart in a way she hadn't expected. "I didn't just learn dessert tonight," she whispered, voice soft, almost a confession. "I learned him. And maybe a little about myself too." She leaned back against the counter, letting the warmth of the kitchen linger in her chest, the echo of possibilities stretching far beyond the final taste of the dessert. Then she felt it, another presence. One that she did not welcome. Spencer Gordon stood in Angelica's apartment, tall, smug, utterly convinced of his own importance. "Angelica, listen," he began, voice dripping with condescension. "I just think." The words died on his tongue. The air shifted. Cold. Sharp. Heavy. The kind of presence that bends the room, compresses it, and announces, "You are in my world now." He froze. His eyes darted around, finally landing on the sleek shadow in the corner, Ariane's, fully composed, but the aura around her was no longer playful or teasing. It was wrath incarnate. "El Maestro," he whispered under his breath, disbelief and panic threading through his arrogance. Ariane stepped forward, deliberate, each footfall a drumbeat of inevitability. "Step back," she said softly, deceptively calm. But the menace in her voice made the word a blade. Spencer scoffed, trying to mask his fear with bravado. "I'm not afraid of." "Afraid?" Ariane's cut him off, voice dropping low, dangerous. "You should have been afraid the moment you thought you could challenge me." Her eyes glinted, sharp, calculating. Every muscle in her body exuded control, precision, and the promise of destruction. The tracker she'd placed on him earlier had pinged softly from her wrist. She had known where he was every step of the way. Every move he made, every arrogant thought, she had anticipated. Spencer's bravado wavered. I just wanted to talk to Angelica," he stammered. "She is safe," Ariane said, voice icy. "What she is not is yours to manipulate. And you have made the mistake of thinking I am just her sister. I am the force that humbles people like you." Spencer's face paled as the realization hit. He swallowed hard. You're El Maestro," Ariane's finished for him, letting the title hang in the air like thunder before a storm. "The woman who decides who rises and who falls. And you, Spencer, have just stepped into a hurricane you cannot survive." Her hand brushed over the console by the door, subtly activating a discreet lockdown feature. The elevator doors clicked, the windows and doors sealed. Panic surged in his eyes. What is this?" Ariane stepped closer, the room shrinking around him. Her voice dropped to a velvet growl. "This is what happens when arrogance meets power it cannot comprehend. You are in my territory. You are nothing here. Do you understand me?" Yes, Spencer stammered, backing away, but every escape route he had was accounted for. "Good," she said, circling him slowly, predator to prey. "I allowed you here once, out of courtesy, out of respect for my sister. But courtesy ends now. You will leave. You will never darken her door again. And if you ever think to challenge me, to test my patience, you will regret it for the rest of your life." Spencer's knees threatened to buckle. The man who had walked into this apartment with arrogance, convinced he could manipulate, threaten, or charm his way to control, left shaking, gasping, a shadow of himself. Ariane's gaze lingered for a heartbeat longer, sharp, lethal. Then, with a single controlled breath, she turned. Calm returned, but the room still trembled from her presence. She stepped toward the window, looking down at the city below, letting the storm within her settle, but leaving a warning clear to anyone who might underestimate her. El Maestro does not forgive. El Maestro does not forget. And El Maestro is always watching. Angelica had watched from the couch, frozen, her heart thundering in her chest. Spencer's arrogance had been infuriating, yes, but she had never imagined what would happen when El Maestro awoke. Her sister moved through the apartment like a shadow, and a hurricane rolled into one graceful, precise, unstoppable. Every word, every step, every glance radiated power, control, and danger. The calm voice, the subtle growl, the predator's poise, it was breathtaking. Angelica's hands clenched in her lap. "Arya," she whispered, awe and fear mingling in her voice. "I've always known, but I never knew it was this." The way Spencer's smugness crumbled, how his confidence evaporated under the weight of her sister's presence, left Angelica wide-eyed. He had thought he could manipulate, charm, or intimidate, and he had been annihilated with quiet, unflinching precision. Angelica realized something profound. This power was absolute. Her sister wasn't just influential, not just untouchable. She was the law, the storm, the force that bent the city without anyone daring to resist. And yet, amidst the wrath, there was a strange elegance, a controlled restraint that made it even more terrifying. Ariane's finally turned to her, the edge softening slightly as her eyes met Angelica's. There was a subtle acknowledgement, a fleeting warmth that reminded Angelica that, behind the unstoppable warrior queen, her sister was still the woman who had raised her, loved her, and protected her. Angelica's chest swelled, half with awe, half with gratitude. I don't think I've ever been prouder of you," she whispered, voice trembling slightly. "Not for what you do, but for who you are. And how you protect me." Ariane's lips twitched in the tiniest hint of a smile, her composure flawless, yet her eyes softened. "You know, I would move mountains for you," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of every sacrifice she had ever made. Angelica exhaled, letting herself absorb the full scope of it, the power, the danger, the love. And for the first time in a long time, she truly understood what it meant to be El Maestro's sister. The room still hummed with residual tension, the storm slowly settling, but Angelica knew one thing: nothing would ever challenge her sister, and nothing would ever intimidate her again. Chapter 32, Zenobia. The hunt intensifies. Zenobia Yana Stavriati sat in the golden glow of her penthouse, the city lights stretching below like scattered diamonds. Her fingers toyed absent-mindedly with a delicate chain around her neck, but her mind was laser-focused on one thing: El Maestro. The memory of their almost kiss at Le Saphir replayed in vivid detail, the brush of fingers, the smoldering gaze, the tease that had been restrained at the last moment. Zenovia's lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. She had felt it too. That spark, that challenge. "I've found my match." A discreet chime at her side announced the arrival of her courier. A slim envelope, black onyx with gold trim, landed gracefully on the glass table before her. She opened it with deliberate care. Inside was a dress, crafted for a goddess, obsidian silk that shimmered like midnight, cut to both command attention and hint at forbidden allure. Alongside it, a note, perfumed, in her unmistakable script. "For the warrior queen, wear it when you next grace the world with your presence. Let us continue what we started." Zenobia traced the delicate fabric with her fingers, imagining how it would drape over Ariane's form, how it would ignite desire and respect in equal measure. The thought made her pulse quicken, a low hum of anticipation vibrating through her. She rose, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below, a kingdom in miniature. "Soon, my queen," she whispered, voice low, sultry, confident. "Soon, you will be mine to challenge, to test, to unravel." Her mind raced with possibilities: an invitation to a gala, a private dinner, a fashion show where the dress would be irresistible, every scenario designed to draw the warrior queen into her orbit, to provoke, to tease, to claim a reaction. She poured herself a glass of wine, swirling it slowly as her gaze hardened. Zenobia Yana Stavriati did not chase lightly, did not pursue for mere interest. She pursued for conquest, for fire, for the thrill of colliding with something and someone untouchable. "And El Maestro," she murmured, letting the title roll off her tongue like silk over steel, "I will not be ignored. Not by you, and certainly not by anyone who thinks they can stand in my way." A shiver of anticipation ran through her as she lifted the glass, a smile curving her lips in triumph. The hunt was no longer subtle. The game had begun, and Zenobia would play it with all the power and patience of a goddess. Chapter 33. Arianes. The invitation arrives. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the city as Arianes settled into her office, reviewing intelligence reports and scanning communications. Every detail mattered, every move considered, but even amidst the pulse of her power, her mind flickered to the memory of Zenobia. A discreet chime at her door announced a courier. A slender figure, impeccably timed, handed her a small black envelope sealed with crimson wax stamped with a stylized Y. Arianes raised an eyebrow, her gloved fingers breaking the seal. Inside, nestled atop soft black tissue, was a folded note and a piece of delicate silk. She unfurled the note, her eyes narrowing at the elegant, precise handwriting. For the warrior queen, wear it when you next grace the world with your presence. Let us continue what we started. Her gaze flicked to the silk beneath the note. Obsidian, flowing, impossibly soft, tailored for a goddess. Her fingers traced the fabric, the weight, the cut, and she felt the pull immediately, the same intoxicating mix of challenge and desire she had experienced when they'd first met. Arianes exhaled slowly, leaning back in her chair. She allowed herself a brief, private smirk. The Greek goddess never plays small, she murmured, eyes scanning the folds of silk, imagining the effect it would have, imagining her own reflection in the mirror. She wants to provoke me, tease me, see if I am human. Her phone buzzed, a subtle reminder that the city never slept and neither could she, but even amidst the duties of El Maestro, the pull of Zenovia's challenge threaded through her veins. With deliberate precision, she rose and placed the fabric and note on her desk, fingers lingering over the silk. Soon, she whispered to herself, almost a promise. We will see who commands the fire between us. The city stretched below, indifferent, yet inside Arianes, a new storm was brewing. The game had escalated, and she knew, deep down, that this collision with Zenobia would not be a simple meeting, it would be a test of control, of desire, and of power. Chapter 33. The Gala. The grand ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers, the polished marble reflecting 1,000 points of light. Guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos murmured in hushed admiration, champagne glasses chiming like distant bells. Ariane Santos Navarro entered with quiet authority, her presence immediately bending the room's energy. She wore power as effortlessly as her black tailored gown, the cut precise, the lines sharp, her shoulders squared, heels clicking like a countdown. Even here, in a room full of politicians and elites, she was the storm everyone whispered about in awe and fear. Her eyes scanned the room with practiced precision. Tonight was not just about appearances. The newly elected mayor would be honored, but Arianes knew the game beneath the game, alliances to be tested, threats to be neutralized, loyalties to be verified. The old mayor had retired gracefully, well provided for, and the transition had been hers to orchestrate. She would not let chaos slip in under her watch. And yet, despite the calculated perfection of the evening, there was a tension in the air, a pull she couldn't ignore. Then she saw her. Zenobia Yana Stavriati. Like a goddess stepping from myth into reality, the Greek fashion titan glided through the crowd. Emerald silk clung and flowed with every step, catching the light, demanding attention without uttering a word. Eyes sharp, lips curved in a knowing smile, she scanned the room, then landed on Arianes. Time slowed. The distance between them was electric measured. Every head turned as the air thickened. Zenobia approached with the deliberate grace of someone who knew the effect she had, but even she paused a fraction of a heartbeat as she met Ariane's gaze. El Maestro, Zenobia said softly, her voice low, velvety, a purr laced with challenge. Arianes tilted her head slightly, assessing, the barest twitch of a smirk on her lips. Greek goddess, she replied, voice equally controlled but edged with intrigue. The conversation began with subtle, razor-sharp politeness, each word a test, a tease. "You seem comfortable in every storm," Zenobia observed, her gaze piercing. "I thrive in storms," Arianes replied smoothly, letting the title hang like a promise. "Especially the ones I create myself." Zenovia's lips curved, a dangerous, slow smile. "And yet, even you can be tempted. Even you can be surprised." Arianes arched an eyebrow, the tiniest flicker of interest betraying her otherwise flawless composure. "Tempted is a choice," she said, deliberately, letting her words linger. "Then let us see which of us controls the choice tonight," Zenobia murmured, stepping just a fraction closer, enough that the warmth of her presence brushed the edge of Ariane's awareness. The ballroom lights refracted in her eyes, ice blue, deep and mesmerizing. Guests continued to chatter, glasses raised, but for Arianes and Zenobia, the gala had shrunk to the space between them, the unspoken contest, the simmering tension, the magnetic pull neither could fully deny. Ariane's pulse quickened despite herself. "This woman is fire, and she wants to see if I burn." And in that moment, the game began anew. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.